Dale Parker waited until the funeral flowers were still fresh on his mother's grave, then backed his truck into the alley behind her shop, hauled out 4 boxes of her handwritten journals, dumped 40 years of her life into a rusted burn barrel, and dropped a lit match on top of them. "Sentimental garbage," he said, watching the smoke climb. Ethan reached barehanded into that fire and pulled out one scorched book. Inside it every Friday for 3 years was a woman's name he had never heard, 12 white roses, and a card signed with his own name. Ethan had never sent that woman a single flower in his life. Before we go any further, please take 1 second to subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end of this story, because what Margaret Parker was hiding will not make sense until the final minute. And leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from so I can see how far this story travels tonight. The morning they buried Margaret Parker, the whole town of Hawthorne, Oregon, smelled like rain and cut stems. Ethan Parker stood at the back of the church in a borrowed jacket that pinched him under the arms, and he counted the people coming through the door because counting was the only thing keeping him upright. 60, 90, 140. By the time the pastor started talking, there were people standing along the walls, people out on the steps, people he had never seen in his life, holding flowers he recognized from his grandmother's cooler. An old man in a feed store cap gripped Ethan's hand so hard it hurt. "Your grandma gave me carnations for my wife's last birthday," the man said. "Wouldn't take my money. Said the register was broken." "The register was never broken," Ethan said. "I know it," the old man said, and his chin shook. "I knew it then, too." That happened 11 more times before the service ended. 11 strangers, 11 stories, 11 times. The register had mysteriously been broken on exactly the day somebody could not pay. Ethan started to feel like he was standing in a room full of people who had known a woman he had only been renting time from. I was 34 years old. He hung drywall and framed houses and rebuilt decks for a living. He had calluses that split every winter, and a truck with 190,000 miles on it, and a rented apartment over the hardware store with almost nothing in it because he had never seen the point of filling a place he was not sure he would stay in. He had eaten dinner at Margaret's kitchen table every Sunday for 22 years. He thought that meant he knew her. I was about to find out how wrong a person could be about the one human being who raised him. The reception was at the Grange Hall Coffee in paper cups and casseroles and dishes with masking tape names on the bottom, and that was where his Uncle Dale finally showed his face. Dale Parker was 57 silver at the temples, still handsome in the way that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. He had not come to the hospital. He had not come to the viewing. He walked into that Grange Hall in a suit that cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, shook 8 hands in 90 seconds, and made straight for his nephew. "Ethan. Dale. That's all I get." "You got the same as everybody else," Ethan said. "A funeral you didn't come to until it was over." Dale let that slide off him. He had a way of smiling that never touched his eyes. "We need to talk about the property," he said. Ethan set his coffee down. "She's been in the ground for 2 hours. Which is exactly why we talk now before people start getting emotional about a building." Dale spread his hands like he was being reasonable. "That corner lot is worth more than the shop ever made in a decade. There's a group out of Portland buying up Main Street. I've already had a conversation." "You had a conversation about my grandmother's store." "About an asset," Dale said. "Ethan, listen to me. That place bled money for years. You know it. I know it. She was 79 years old and still standing on a concrete floor 12 hours a day for what, $400 a week. Somebody in this family has to be the adult." Ethan felt something rise in his chest, and it was not grief anymore. "You want to be the adult, you should have shown up when she was falling asleep in her chair with her shoes still on." Dale's smile finally slipped. "Careful." "I'm not being careful today," Ethan said. 15 people were pretending not to listen. Dale straightened his cuff, leaned in close enough that only Ethan could hear him, and said the thing that would keep Ethan awake for the next 3 nights. "You want to know what she was really doing with that money? Ask yourself why an old woman running a dying flower shop was writing out cash every single week to a person nobody in this family has ever met." Then he walked out and left that sentence sitting in the middle of Ethan's chest like a nail. Ethan did not sleep that night. At 10 the next morning, he sat across a scratched desk from Ruth Delaney, who had been Margaret's attorney since 1994 and who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and talked to Ethan like he was still 9 years old. "She updated everything 14 months ago," Ruth said. "The house goes to you. The shop goes to you. The land under the shop goes to you. There's a small account about 11,000 that also goes to you. And Dale. Ruth took her glasses off. Dale received his inheritance in 1998 and 2004, and again in 2011. She wrote it down each time. She called them advances. He called them loans. Either way, the paper says he has been paid. He's going to fight it. He is absolutely going to fight it, Ruth said, and he is going to lose, and he is going to make your life ugly for 6 to 9 months while he loses. She pushed a folder across the desk. But that is not why I asked you to come in alone. Ethan looked at the folder and did not touch it. Margaret left one instruction that is not legally binding, Ruth said. I told her that. She said she did not care. She said if I did not read it to you exactly the way she wrote it, she would haunt my office. That sounds like her. Ruth put her glasses back on and read, To my grandson Ethan, the building is not the inheritance. Keep the Friday order going. You will understand when you understand. Do not let anyone throw away my books. Ethan waited. Ruth turned the page over. There was nothing on the back. That's it, he said. That's it. What's the Friday order? I have no idea, Ruth said. I asked her 3 times. 3 times she changed the subject to my knees. Ethan drove to the shop with those 2 words going around in his head like a coin in a dryer. Friday order. He had helped in that building since he was a kid. He had swept it, hauled buckets, fixed the cooler compressor twice. He had never once heard anybody say Friday order. He unlocked the door with a key that still had a scrap of green ribbon tied to it, and the smell hit him so hard he had to hold the door frame. Wet paper, cold water, eucalyptus, 40 years of his grandmother in a single breath. He got about 4 steps in before he heard crying from the back room. Wanda Hollis was 68 years old and had worked that shop for 22 years and had never in her life let anybody see her cry. She was sitting on an upturned bucket with a stack of order cards in her lap and mascara halfway down her face, and when she saw Ethan, she stood up so fast the cards went everywhere. I was going to clean, she said. I came in to clean, and I sat down and I just... Wanda. 22 years, she said. 22 years and I never took a Friday off. Not one. Ethan crouched and started picking up the cards. Why not? And Wanda Hollis went completely still. He looked up at her. She was staring at the wall like she had just walked into a room she was not supposed to be in. Wanda. You should talk to Ruth, she said. I just came from Ruth. Ruth doesn't know. What's the Friday order? Ethan. She left me a note about it. He stood up. She left me exactly 4 sentences, and one of them was keep the Friday order going. So somebody in this town is going to tell me what that means, and right now, the only person standing here is you. Wanda's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her apron. I promised her, she said. She's gone. That's when a promise counts, Wanda said, and her voice cracked in half. That's the only time a promise counts, Ethan, when the person can't check on you anymore. He backed off. He made her a cup of coffee in the little back room with the ancient percolator, and they sat there for a while, and she told him 3 stories about Margaret that made him laugh, and not one of them explained anything. But when she left at 4 o'clock, she stopped at the door with her purse on her shoulder and said without turning around, The green ledger's under the register. She kept the walk-in orders in the computer. She kept the other one by hand. Then she was gone. The green ledger was exactly where she said it was, and it was heavier than it looked. And the first thing Ethan noticed when he opened it was that his grandmother's handwriting got smaller every year, the way a person's does when their eyes start going and they are too stubborn to admit it. The second thing he noticed was that the entire book was Fridays, page after page after page, same date pattern, same 3 lines. Friday, 1 dozen white roses, Carter E. He turned the page. Friday, 1 dozen white roses, Carter E. He turned again. And again. He turned until his thumb went numb. 2 years back, 2.5, 3. Every single Friday without one gap, without one skipped week, 1 dozen white roses for somebody named Carter. And in the far right column, in the space where Margaret always wrote who the flowers were from the same 2 words in the same tired handwriting 156 times, from Ethan. He sat down on the floor behind the counter with the ledger open in his lap and read it twice, and the second time was worse than the first, because the second time he started doing math. 1 dozen white roses at wholesale, say $18, say 22 with the card and the delivery, times 52, times 3 years. Somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 of a dying flower shop's money had walked out that door under his name to a woman he had never met, and his Uncle Dale already knew about it. Ethan called Wanda from the shop phone. She picked up on the first ring, which told him she had been sitting there waiting for it. "Who is Carter E.?" Silence on the line. "Wanda, I'm holding 3 years of my own signature on cards I never wrote." "Emily," Wanda said quietly. "Emily Carter. Who is she to my grandmother?" "Nobody." "Wanda." "I mean it, Ethan, that's the truth. She's nobody. She came in one time 3 years ago, and I was there, and I have thought about that afternoon every week of my life since." Wanda's voice went thin. "Your grandmother watched that young woman walk out the door, and she stood at the window, and she did not move for a long time, and then she said, 'Wanda, get me the white roses.'" "For who?" "For her." "Why?" "I asked her that." Wanda took a breath that shook. She said, "Because somebody has to." Ethan pressed the phone hard against his ear. "And my name? Why my name on the card?" The line went quiet for so long that he thought the call had dropped. "You need to ask her books," Wanda said. "Not me, her books." "Wanda, my name? Why my name?" "Because she was terrified," Wanda said, and hung up. He was still standing there with the phone in his hand when he heard the truck in the alley. It was 6:20 in the evening. Ethan came out the back door, and Dale was already lifting the third box out of the bed, and there was a burn barrel by the fence that had been used for cardboard for as long as Ethan could remember, and it was already going. "Dale." "Cleaning up," Dale said, cheerful as a man mowing a lawn. "You're welcome, by the way." "Those are hers." "They're paper." Dale dumped the box. Notebooks went in by the dozen, spiral-bound leather one with a rubber band around it holding it together. "Ethan, we've got maybe 3 weeks before an appraiser walks that building, and I am not having him step over 30 years of an old woman's grocery lists." Ethan crossed that alley faster than he had moved in years. He got a hand on the fourth box, and Dale got a hand on it too, and for a second the two of them just stood there pulling in opposite directions like a couple of kids. "Let go," Dale said. "Put it down." "Let go, Ethan." She wrote in these every night of her life. "And what did it get her?" Dale shouted. And that was the first crack in the polish, the first honest thing to come out of the man in 20 years. What did any of it get her? She died on a concrete floor in a store that made no money because she kept giving it away to anybody with a sad face, and you want to stand here and worship her handwriting. The box tore. Notebooks hit the gravel. And Ethan saw the fire take the corner of one of them, and he did not think he just reached in, and he got 2 fingers burned and his sleeve scorched, and he came out of that barrel with one book smoking in his hands, beating it against his thigh until it went out. Dale stared at him. "You are exactly like her," he said. "You know that exactly. Sentimental about the wrong things and blind about the important ones." Ethan held the ruined notebook against his chest. "Say what you came to say." "Fine." Dale wiped his hands on a handkerchief slow, like a man who had rehearsed. 16 months ago, I saw her bank statements. Do you know why? Because she asked me to help her with the tax forms, which is the only time in 9 years that woman asked me for anything. And I sat at her table and I went down that column, and there was money going out every single week to the same place, and when I asked her about it, she took the papers out of my hands and told me to go home. It was flowers. "It was not just flowers," Dale said. "The flowers came out of the shop. This came out of her personal account. $400 a month, Ethan, for 3 years, to a name I had never heard in my life." Ethan felt the alley tilt. $14,000, Dale said. "Give or take. That's your inheritance, nephew. That's what she did with it. So before you stand there looking at me like I'm the devil, you might want to ask yourself who was actually taking advantage of that woman." He got in his truck. He rolled the window down. "I'm contesting," he said. "Talk to your lawyer, and when the accountant finds that money, and everybody in Hawthorne is going to hear about the saint of Main Street and where her money really went." The truck pulled out. Ethan stood in the alley until the smoke was gone. He did not go home. He went back inside. He locked the door. He turned on every light in that shop, and he started reading. The burned notebook was from 2019, and most of it was orders and weather. But Wanda had said the book's plural, and Dale had only gotten 4 boxes, and Ethan had spent his whole adult life around buildings, and he knew that when somebody hides something, they do not put it high, they put it low, because low is where you can reach it at 79 years old with a bad hip. He found them at 9:40 that night. The storage room behind the cooler had a wooden shelving unit his own father had built in 1988, and the bottom shelf sat about 6 inches off the floor, and when Ethan got down on his stomach with a flashlight, he saw the edge of a plastic tub pushed all the way to the back wall. He dragged it out. He sat on the cold floor. He took the lid off. Journals, not order books, journals. 31 of them banded together in stacks of 5 and on the front of the top one in marker. In his grandmother's hand it said, one word, Ethan. His own name looked back at him from a box she had hidden under a shelf. He opened the first one with hands that would not hold steady. Most of it was ordinary. Tuesday, the Hendricks funeral, 40 stems. Wednesday, the compressor again. Thursday, Ethan came by and fixed the porch step and would not take $1 for it and would not stay for supper either, and I let him go, which I should not have. He read that line 4 times. And I let him go, which I should not have. He kept going. He read about himself the way a man reads a letter that was never meant to reach him. She wrote about the year he stopped talking after his mother left. She wrote about the day his father died and how Ethan was 14 and did not cry at the service, and how she had watched him carry chairs and stack tables and clean up the whole hall by himself afterward because he could not sit still with what he was feeling. She wrote, that boy will work himself into the ground to avoid one quiet minute alone with his own heart. Ethan put the journal down on the floor and put his hand over his mouth. Then he found the one from 3 years ago from a Thursday in October, and everything changed. She wrote, a young woman came in today for her mother's funeral. Carter is the name. She could not say what she wanted. She stood at the counter with her mouth open and nothing came out, and she started apologizing to me for it. Apologizing. I asked her who else was coming to the service, and she said nobody. I asked her about family. She said her mother was it. I have been in this business 40 years, and I have seen grief 1,000 times, and this was not grief. Grief has an edge to it. This girl was hollowed out. She held those roses like she was holding the last thing on earth, and I watched her go out my door into an empty car in an empty parking lot, and I stood there and I thought, dear God, that is exactly the same look my grandson had at 14. Ethan, read it again. Exactly the same look my grandson had at 14. The next entry was 2 weeks later. Sent the roses. Wanda thinks I have lost my mind. Perhaps I have. No return address. I wrote on the card that somebody should remind her she is still loved, and I meant it, and I will keep meaning it every Friday until she believes it. Then 4 months in an entry that made him stop breathing. She called the shop today. She wanted to know if I had a record of who sends the white roses. I told her I could not give out that information, which was not a lie, only a coward's version of the truth. She said, please, I need to know if he is real. She has decided it is a man. She has built somebody in her head out of 12 stems a week, and I do not have the heart to take him away from her. And then 6 weeks after that, the entry Ethan would remember on his deathbed. I did a terrible thing today, or a wonderful one, and I will not know which for a long time. She asked again. She asked so kindly, and I heard myself say a name. I said Ethan, not because I planned it, because it is the only name that lives in the front of my mouth. But God help me, the second it was out, I knew I would not take it back. Because there is a young woman on the edge of town who thinks nobody in this world has noticed her, and there is a young man on the other side of town who has decided he does not need to be noticed, and I am 76 years old, and I have buried a husband and a son, and I do not have the time to be careful anymore. Ethan sat on that floor with his back against the cooler and read until 2 in the morning, and the story assembled itself around him, piece by piece, like a house going up. She had never told Emily Carter the truth. She had never told Ethan anything. For 3 years, one woman had been getting flowers from a man who did not know she existed, and that man had been eating pot roast at his grandmother's table every Sunday, while she asked him casually, the way you ask about the weather, whether he had met anybody. He found the note about the money on the last page of the second-to-last journal. She wrote, the roses are the easy part. The rest is not my business, and I am doing it anyway. The girl is behind on the farmhouse. Her mother's medical bills took everything and then some, and she is selling paintings for $40 at a fair to people who do not deserve them. I have arranged with the bank to pay the difference on her note each month. They think I am a family friend. I let them think it. If Dale ever sees this, he will call me a fool. Let him. Dale has never once in his life been on the other side of a locked door with nobody coming. Ethan closed the journal. $14,000, $400 a month. his inheritance walking out the door for 3 years to keep a stranger from losing her mother's house. He laughed out loud in that empty shop, one hard, ugly laugh, and then he was crying and he did not stop for a while, and there was nobody in the building to see it, which was the only reason he let it happen at all. At 3 in the morning, he opened the last journal in the tub. The final entry was dated 9 days before she died. The handwriting was worse. The lines ran downhill. She wrote, "My chest has been tight all week. I am not telling anybody because they will make me sit down, and I am not finished. I am not finished because I have been a coward about the last part. I always told myself I would introduce them when the time was right. Then I told myself I would write it in a letter. There are letters in the catalog on the 3rd shelf if anyone ever looks, and I have written 11 of them and mailed none, and I know exactly what that makes me. But if I do not get to it, then this is where it has to be said. Ethan, if you are reading this, then you found the tub, which means you were looking, which means you did not let Dale take everything, which means I was right about you. Friday's order is already paid for. It is in the cooler. It is the only thing I have ever asked you for. Take it out there yourself. Do not call. Do not send Wanda. Do not stand in my alley trying to think of a reason not to go. She will open the door, and she will see your face, and she will believe she knows who you are. Let her, and then tell her the truth, because a thing built on a kindness can survive the truth, and I am betting the last of my life on that." Ethan sat there with the book open until the windows went gray. Then he got up. His knees cracked. His hands hurt. He walked past the register, past the ruined burn barrel, out the back window, and he opened the cooler door, and there it was on the 2nd shelf, wrapped, tied ready, the way she had left it before she went home for the last time. 1 dozen white roses, and tucked in the greenery in handwriting that shook badly at the end, but never once stopped a small white card with 2 words on it, from Ethan. She read 3 more before he asked her to stop, and it was 12:41 when Ethan Parker finally sat all the way down on the porch boards with his back against the rail because his legs would not hold the weight of what he was hearing. "He came by Sunday and fixed a hinge that wasn't broken," Emily read. "He needed something to do with his hands, so he wouldn't have to answer me when I asked him if he'd been seeing anybody. I let him have the hinge. Stop. He turned 33 today. He said he didn't want a cake. I made one anyway, and he ate 2 pieces standing up at the counter like a man stealing from his own life." Emily, "He is not cold. People think he's cold. He is the warmest person I have ever raised, and he keeps it under so much concrete that I have started to worry it will set." "Stop." His voice came out strange. "Please." She stopped. He sat there with his forearms on his knees and looked at nothing, and for a full minute the only sound on that property was a screen door moving in the wind. 3 years, he said finally. She told a stranger everything about me, and she never once said your name at her own kitchen table. I'm the stranger in that sentence. I know what you are in that sentence. Do you... Emily set the letters down between them like something that might go off. Because I've been sitting here since 8:15 this morning trying to decide what I actually am, and I've narrowed it down to 2 things, and I don't like either one. Say them. Either I'm a woman a kind old lady felt sorry for, she swallowed, or I'm a job. You're not a job. She wrote me 156 times, Ethan, and she never signed her own name once. Not once. That's not a friendship. That's a project. Emily's voice climbed, and she pulled it back down by force. She built me a man out of paper. She told me what he liked and how he took his coffee and what he was afraid of. And I read those letters at 2 in the morning for 3 years, and I answered them out loud in an empty kitchen like an idiot. You're not an idiot. I talked to the flowers. Emily, I'm telling you what I did so you don't have to find out later and be gentle about it, she said. I talked to them, every Friday, out loud, because it was the only conversation I had all week. Ethan did not say anything for a moment, and then he said the truest thing he had in him. I eat standing up over the sink so I don't have to look at an empty chair, he said, every night, 11 years. Emily turned her head. So don't tell me what's pathetic, he said. I'll lose that contest. It was 12:53. She wiped her face and stood up and said, I need you to leave. And then immediately, I don't want you to leave, but I need you to, because Ruth Delaney is going to call you in about an hour and tell you the same thing, and I'd rather it be my idea. How do you know about Ruth Delaney? Emily held up the manila envelope. Her name's on the response instructions, she said. The man who handed me this told me not to talk to anybody named Parker, and then 12 minutes later, 2 men named Parker were standing in my yard yelling at each other. Ethan almost laughed. Fair. There's one more thing. She was hugging her elbows now. And I have to say it fast. Okay. If I lose this house, I want it on the record that it wasn't because a woman helped me. It'll be because I didn't know she was helping me and I couldn't do it on my own. Her chin came up. So don't come out here with a checkbook. I mean it. Whatever you're about to think of doing on the drive home, don't. I wasn't. You were, Emily said. You've got the same face she had when she said the register was broken. He got in the truck. I was halfway down the drive when she came running after him barefoot in the gravel waving, and he hit the brakes so hard the roses on the seat slid to the floor. What? The last letter. She was out of breath. There's one I didn't read to you. Why not? Because it came 4 days after she died. The engine idled. Ethan stared at her. That's not possible. It came with the Friday delivery, Emily said. The van, the boy who doesn't talk. He handed me the flowers, and there was an envelope down in the greenery like always, and I opened it and it was in her handwriting and it was 3 sentences long and it wasn't like the others. She was shaking. I didn't know she was dead. I found that out this morning, from you, at 8:15. What did it say? It said I have run out of time to do this the careful way. Emily's voice went hoarse. It said tell him about the catalog. Ethan's hands went cold on the wheel. There are letters in the catalog on the 3rd shelf, he said. She wrote that in her last journal, 11 letters. She never mailed one. Then go get them. It was 1:31 when he got back to the shop, and Wanda was standing in the doorway with the phone in her hand and a look on her face that stopped him at the curb. Where have you been? Bellflower Road. Ethan Parker. Wanda, the 3rd shelf. The old flower catalogs. Which one? Ruth has called 4 times. Which catalog? The Holland Bulb book, the big green one, 2003. But Ethan, you need to hear this first. Wanda held the phone against her chest. Fern Ackerley called me from the credit union at noon and told me the whole town is talking about it by 2 o'clock, and it is now 1:31. Talking about what? Dale put it on Facebook. Ethan stopped moving. He wrote a paragraph, Wanda said. Very polite, very sad. He said his mother was taken advantage of in her final years by a woman who preyed on her generosity, and he's asking for the community's patience while the family sorts it out legally. Her mouth was trembling. 240 comments, Ethan. People are naming her. People who have never met her are naming her. That was 3 hours after he served her. He filed at 9 and he posted at 11:15, Wanda said. He had it written before he walked into the courthouse. Ethan went past her into the shop and got the ladder. The Holland Bulb catalog from 2003 was on the 3rd shelf under 9 inches of other catalogs, and it was fat in a way a catalog should not be. And when he brought it down and opened it on the counter, 11 envelopes fell out onto the wood. Everyone had his name on it, everyone was sealed, and everyone had a date in the corner where a stamp should have been. He read them out of order because he could not make his hands go in a line. The first one he opened was from the 2nd year. Ethan, I have done something I cannot undo, and I am going to tell you about it on Sunday. I have practiced it in the car twice. The next. I did not tell you on Sunday. You came in with your hands cut up from the Fletcher job, and you looked so tired and I gave you supper instead. Coward. The next. Wanda says I should tell you both at the same time. Wanda has never had to watch someone's face while she takes something away from them. The next. She called the shop today and asked about you. Not about the flowers. About you. She asked if you were kind. I said yes. That is the only thing I have said to that girl in 3 years that was entirely true, and I said it about you. Ethan sat down on the stool behind the register. Wanda, I know. You knew about the letters. I knew she wrote them. Wanda's voice was flat with old grief. I did not know she never sent one. I thought she'd worked up to it. Every spring I'd say, Margaret, is it done? And she'd say it's nearly done, and I stopped asking in about April because it was making her sit down in the middle of the day. It was 1:52 when Ethan opened the one with the latest date, and it was 2 paragraphs long, and it changed the shape of the entire thing. Ethan, if you are reading these, then I did not get it said out loud, which means I am gone, which means I owe you the last part. I want you to know I did not pick her at random. I have let you believe for 3 years in every one of these letters that I saw a sad girl in my shop and acted on impulse. That is what I told Wanda, and that is what I told myself for the first 11 months, and it was not true. I knew who she was before she got to the counter. I knew the second she said the name. Ethan read it again. Wanda. What? She knew who Emily was. Before. Wanda's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. Before what? Before she came in. She says she knew the second she heard the name Carter. That's not right, Wanda said. I was standing right there. That girl said her mother's name for the death notice, and your grandmother wrote it down, and she never said a word about knowing anybody. What was the name? Ethan. Wanda, what was the mother's name? Wanda set the cup down very slowly. Rosalind, she said. Rosalind Carter. And I only remember it because Margaret asked her to spell it twice, and she never asked anybody to spell anything twice. That woman could spell Kowalczyk off the top of her head. It was 2:11 when Ruth Delaney's car pulled up outside, and she came through that door without knocking and put a folder on the counter hard enough to make the register jump. I told you not to go out there. I know. I told you twice. I know. Dale's attorney already has it. Ruth pulled her glasses off. There's a photograph. Somebody driving by on Bellflower Road at noon took a picture of your truck in that driveway and sent it to him, and it was attached to an email at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Who took it? Does it matter? It's a 7-mile road with 9 houses on it, Ruth, so yes, it matters. It matters exactly none, Ruth said, because the photograph exists and a judge will see it, 4 hours after she was served Ethan. 4 hours. He was on her porch when I got there. He was standing on the porch of a woman who has nobody telling her she'd robbed a dead woman, and I'm the problem. You're not the problem. You're the evidence. Ruth sat down on the second stool and rubbed her eyes and suddenly looked exactly as old as she was. Now sit down, because there's a piece of this you don't have, and I have been sitting on it since 10 this morning trying to decide if it helps you or buries you. Ethan sat. 14 months ago, when Margaret rewrote the will, Ruth said, she also asked me to draft something else. She asked me to draft a gift instrument, a formal one, transferring $9,000 to Emily Carter in writing with a purpose stated on the face of it, so that nobody could ever call it anything but a gift. She what? She was covering herself. Ruth tapped the folder. Or covering the girl. Both probably. She knew Dale had seen the statements. She was not a stupid woman, Ethan. She was a woman with a bad heart who had been slowly boxed in by her own kindness, and she came in here 14 months ago and said, Ruth, if I go, they're going to say she took it, so let's write down that I gave it. Then we're fine. Where is it? Ruth did not answer. Ruth, where is it? She never signed it, Ruth said. I drafted it. I called her twice. She came in once in March, and she sat in that chair and she read it and she put it down and she said, if I sign this, then someone has to hand it to her and then she'll know, and then it stops being a kindness and starts being a debt. Ruth's jaw tightened. And she walked out with it unsigned, and I let her because she was 79 and it was her money and it was not my business. The shop was very quiet. So there's a document, Ethan said, that proves everything, and it's worth nothing. It's worth something, Ruth said. It's worth a great deal to a judge as evidence of intent. It is not worth anything to a bank on August 1st. It was 2:34. How much time do I actually have? Ethan said. On the will months, maybe a year. On the house. Ruth checked the file. The arrears as of the last payment were $8,600. She was paying $400 against it, and the interest was eating about $140 of that, which is why 3 years of money moved the needle so slowly. The bank's forbearance agreement is written in 90-day blocks, and it renews on the 1st on receipt. So no payment on August 1st. So no renewal on August 1st, Ruth said. And then the whole $8,600 is due and callable, and they will call it because there's a Portland group buying the co-op land and Bellflower Road is suddenly worth looking at. Ethan stood up. Say that last part again. Ruth blinked. The Portland group. The same group. There's one group, Ethan. It's a small county. Dale's group. Dale's group, Ruth said slowly, is buying the corner of Main and 3rd. If they're also looking at agricultural parcels out past the co-op then. She stopped. Then he's not just trying to break the will, Ethan said. He's trying to break her. You cannot prove that. He posted at 11:15, Ruth. He filed at 9, and he posted at 11:15, and by 2 o'clock this town has decided she's a con artist. What happens to a woman in a small town when everybody decides that... Ruth said nothing. She stopped selling paintings at the fair. Ethan said. She stops getting invited to anything. And then in 9 days, she can't make a payment she didn't know existed, and the house goes cheap and quiet, and nobody in Hawthorne says a word about it because the paper already told them who she was. Wanda made a small sound behind the counter. I need to know about Rosalind Carter, Ethan said. Who? Her mother. He was already pulling the stool over to the shelf. My grandmother knew that name. She wrote it in a letter she never mailed. Wanda, how far back do the shop books go? 1986. All of them. All of them, Wanda said. In the cabinet under the sink in the back. And Ethan, honey, that's 40 years of Fridays. Then we better start. It was 3:10 when they started, and 8:40 when they found it. And in between, Wanda made 2 pots of coffee. And Ruth Delaney, who billed $400 an hour, took her shoes off and sat on the floor of a flower shop with a ledger from 1994 in her lap and did not send a bill for any of it. They went year by year. Ethan took the 90s. Wanda took the 2000s. Ruth took the 80s because she was the only one who could read the old bookkeeper's hand. At 4:50, Wanda found a page with the corner folded down and said, "Oh, Margaret," and had to go outside for a minute. At 5:30, Ethan found the week his father died and had to put the book down and walk to the cooler and stand in the cold with the door open until it passed. At 6:15, Ruth said, "There's a man in 1991 who bought lilies every Thursday for 4 years and then stopped in 1 week, and I have decided I don't want to know." At 7:40, Wanda said the thing that broke the day open. "Ethan, your grandmother didn't start the Friday order 3 years ago." He looked up. "There's a Friday order in 1999, Wanda said, and her voice was strange. 1 dozen white roses, every Friday, for 14 months. To who?" Wanda turned the ledger around and pushed it across the floor to him, and Ethan looked at the delivery column, and there was no address in it because the address was the building he was sitting in. The roses had come to Parker's garden house. "She wasn't sending them," Ethan said. "No, she was getting them. Every Friday," Wanda said, "starting 11 days after your father's funeral." Ruth put her hand over her mouth. Ethan turned the page. He turned another. 14 months of Fridays, every one of them, the same 1 dozen white roses delivered to a woman who owned a flower shop and could have cut her own. "Who sends flowers to a florist?" Wanda whispered. "Somebody who knew she wouldn't cut them for herself," Ethan said. He looked at the far right column where his grandmother wrote who the flowers were from, and for 140 pages of his life, that column had said, "From Ethan." In 1999, it said in the bookkeeper's hand, "Sender declines, sender declines, sender declines, sender declines, week after week after week." "She never knew," Ethan said. "Wait," Ruth said. She was up on her knees now, reaching. "Give me that. Give it to me." She took the ledger and turned to the last of the 14 months, and she ran her finger down to the final entry, the one where it stopped, and she went absolutely still. "What?" Ethan said. "On the last one, whoever kept these books wrote a note," Ruth said, "because the account had to be closed out. You can decline to have your name on a card, but you cannot decline to have your name on a check." "Ruth." "There's a name in the margin," Ruth said. She turned the ledger around. Wanda leaned in. Ethan did not move because he already knew he had known since 2:11 that afternoon. He had known since a letter in an old catalog said, "I knew the second she said the name." In the margin of a page from March of the year 2000 in faded pencil, in a bookkeeper's careful hand, it said, "ACCT closed per R. Carter." Nobody said anything for a long moment, and then Wanda Hollis said in a voice that did not sound like hers, "Read it out loud. I want to hear somebody say it." "Account closed," Ethan said, "per R. Carter." R. Carter. Rosalind Carter. "That woman is dead," Wanda said. "That woman's been dead 3 years. She wasn't dead in 1999. Ethan put his thumb on the pencil mark like he could rub it into meaning something else. "In 1999, she was sending my grandmother a dozen white roses every Friday for 14 months and refusing to put her name on the card. It was 8:47 at night, and Ruth Delaney was sitting on the floor of a flower shop in her stocking feet, and she had gone the color of the wall behind her." "Ruth." She did not answer. "Ruth, you've been her lawyer since 1994. "I have." "So you were her lawyer in 1999? "I was." "Then say something." Ruth put the ledger down on the floor and pressed both hands flat on top of it, and when she looked up, her eyes were terrible. "Your father," she said, "did not die of a heart attack. The cooler hummed. Ethan heard it like it was inside his skull. "He died on Route 9, Ethan said. "Everybody knows that. He was coming back from a job in Corvallis, and it was February, and there was ice." "That's what you were told. That's what happened." "That's part of what happened." Ruth's voice was steady, and she was working very hard to keep it that way. "Ethan, I need you to understand that I have carried this since you were 14 years old, and I have never once been free to hand it to you, and now I am going to, and after tonight you will not be able to give it back." Wanda said, "Ruth, don't." "He's holding the ledger, Wanda." "He is a boy who buried his grandmother 11 days ago. He is 34, and he is about to walk into a courtroom," Ruth said, "and I am not letting him get there without knowing what is in his own family's file." Ethan set the ledger aside. He was very calm, and he recognized the calm because it was the same thing that had come over him at 14 when he had stacked 90 chairs by himself in the Grange Hall while everybody else ate potato salad. "Say it," he said. "There was another vehicle," Ruth said. The shop went so quiet that they could hear a car go by 2 streets over. "Nobody ever told me that. Nobody was ever going to tell you that. There was a police report." "There was, and it went to the county, and it went to 2 insurance companies, and it went to me," Ruth said, "and your grandmother read it at my kitchen table because she would not come to the office, and then she put it face down and she said, 'Ruth, the boy has lost his mother and his father in 8 years, and he is not going to grow up with a name to hate.' And she made me promise." "And you promised?" "I promised a woman who had just lost her only son," Ruth said. "Yes, I promised." "Who was in the other vehicle?" Ruth did not blink. "You already know," she said. "Say it anyway." "Rosalind Carter," Ruth said. "She was 41 years old. She had a 9-year-old daughter in the back seat. She came off the county road onto Route 9 at 4 in the afternoon in February, and she did not stop long enough, and your father was doing 55 in a work truck with 300 pounds of lumber on the rack, and there was nothing he could do, and there was nothing she could do, and the county ruled it an accident and did not charge her." Wanda made a sound and put her hand over her mouth. "A 9-year-old daughter," Ethan said. "Yes." "In the back seat." "Yes. Emily was in the car." "Emily was in the car," Ruth said. "Emily Carter, age 9, uninjured, treated at the scene and released. It is on the 2nd page. It has been on the 2nd page of a file in my office for 20 years. It was 8:56. Ethan stood up. He walked the length of the shop all the way to the front window and stood there with his back to both of them. "Say the rest of it," he said. "There's more," Wanda whispered. "There's always more," Ethan said. "She's been holding it in her mouth for an hour. Say it, Ruth." Ruth got up off the floor, which took her a while, and she did not sit back down. 11 days after the funeral roses started coming to this shop," she said. "Your grandmother called me in a fury. In an absolute fury, Ethan, the only time in 30 years I ever heard that woman raise her voice. She said, 'Somebody is sending me flowers with no name on them, and I want to know who, and I want it stopped because I am not a woman who gets to be comforted by a coward.' She didn't know. She did not know. Not then." Ruth's jaw worked. "So she called the wire service, and they wouldn't tell her, and she called the shop in Salem that placed them, and they wouldn't tell her, and it went on. 14 months, every Friday, and she stopped fighting it around the 4th month, and she let them come. And in March of 2000, the account closed. In March of 2000, Ruth said, there was a settlement conference. The insurance company for the Carters offered a number. It was not a large number. It was what people like that have." She swallowed. "And your grandmother sat in a conference room in Eugene with a check in front of her, and Rosalind Carter 12 feet away. And that was the first time either of those women had been in the same room. And Margaret looked at that woman for about 30 seconds, and then she pushed the paper back across the table and said, 'I don't want it,' and walked out." "Yeah." Ethan turned around. "She refused it. She refused all of it." "How much?" $62,000, Ruth said. Wanda said, "Oh, Margaret." "She had a mortgage on this building," Ethan said. "She had a mortgage on this building until 2014. I helped her celebrate. We had a cake. Ruth, she was 70 years old and she had a cake about a mortgage." "I know." "She refused $62,000. She said, and I remember it exactly because I wrote it down in the car afterward." Ruth said, "She said that woman has a little girl and no husband, and she is going to spend the rest of her life doing arithmetic about the day she killed a man. I am not taking her house too." Ethan put his hand on the window frame. And 2 weeks later the roses stopped, Ruth said, because Rosalind Carter had finally been in a room with her and there was nothing left to send. It was 9:11 at night. So my grandmother knew exactly who walked into this shop 3 years ago, Ethan said. She knew the second the girl said the name, Ruth said. That's why she made her spell it twice. She wasn't confirming the spelling. She was buying herself 10 seconds. And then she sent her flowers for 3 years and paid her mortgage with my name on the card. With your name on the card, Ruth said, and finally her voice broke, because she was 76 years old and she could not think of one other thing on God's earth to do with it. Ethan drove home at 9:40 and sat in his truck outside the hardware store with the engine off until 11. He thought about a 9-year-old girl in a back seat. He thought about his own 14th birthday, which had been 6 weeks after the funeral, and how his grandmother had made a cake anyway, and he had eaten 2 pieces standing up at the counter, and how 20 years later she had written that same sentence down about a man of 33 and mailed it to a stranger. He thought about Emily Carter saying, "I have narrowed it down to 2 things, and I don't like either one." He got out his phone at 11:15. He got as far as her number. He put it back in his pocket. At 6:40 the next morning, Saturday, Wanda unlocked the shop and found him already inside with every ledger from 1996 to 2002 open on the floor in a half circle. "You slept here." "I didn't sleep anywhere." "Ethan, there's a gap." He did not look up. 1999, there's a Friday order coming in, and there's not one word about it in her journals, and I read all 31 of them, and I would have remembered. Wanda set her purse down slowly. "The tub under the shelf," she said. 31 journals. Oldest one starts in 2004. "Then where are the ones before that?" Ethan looked up at her, and Wanda understood before he said it, and she sat down hard on the bucket. "Oh no." 4 boxes, Ethan said, "in a barrel, in the alley, and I pulled one out and it was from 2019. "Ethan, honey." 25 years of her life, he said. Everything she ever thought about my father, everything she thought when those flowers came, the day she pushed that check back across the table, all of it went up in an alley behind a flower shop because my uncle didn't want an appraiser to have to step over it. Wanda started to cry, and Ethan sat on the floor and let her because there was nothing to say to that. At 7:50, she blew her nose and said, "Dot Merriman." "Who?" "Dot Merriman kept these books until 2004. She's the hand in that margin. She's 91 years old and she's out at Cedar Glen, and last Christmas she recited my mother's phone number from 1971 at me." Wanda stood up and got her purse. "Get your keys." Cedar Glen let them in at 8:30 on a Saturday because Wanda Hollis had sent flowers to every funeral that building had produced in 20 years. Dot Merriman was small and upright, and she took one look at Ethan and said, "You're Tom's boy." "Yes, ma'am." "You've got his hands. Sit down, you're too tall." He sat down. He put the 1999 ledger on the table in front of her and opened it to March of 2000, and Dot Merriman put on her glasses and looked at her own handwriting from 20 years ago and did not say anything for a long time. "I wondered if this would ever come out," she said. "You knew." "I did the book, son. I knew before Margaret did." Dot folded her hands. "The wire service sends a copy of the payment record quarterly for reconciliation. It doesn't go on the card, it goes on the invoice. So I had a name in a column in my kitchen for 11 months while that woman stood in her shop wondering who was doing it to her. You never told her." "I told her in March," Dot said. "The day before that meeting in Eugene. I drove down here and I put it on the counter and I said, 'Margaret, you're going to walk into a room tomorrow and I don't want you walking in blind.'" Wanda leaned forward. "What did she do?" "She read it. She sat down on that stool by the register, and she said, 'Dot, how long?' And you said 14 months. And she said 14 months of Fridays." Dot's eyes were wet behind the glasses. "And then she said the thing I have thought about every week of my life since, and I am 91 years old, so that is a great many weeks." "What did she say?" "She said a woman who can do a thing for 14 months without her name on it is not a woman who is trying to get away with something." It was 9:02 in the morning. "That's why she refused the money," Ethan said. "That is exactly why she refused the money," Dot said. "And I want you to hear the rest because Ruth Delaney wasn't in the parking lot afterward, and I was. That woman came out of that building and got to her car and could not get the key in the door. She stood there with her hand shaking so bad she couldn't get a key in a door. And I said, 'Margaret, get in, I'll drive.' and she got in, and she said, "I have just made a decision I am going to be paying for the rest of my life." "Paying how?" "That's what I asked her." Dot took her glasses off. She said, "Because now I know what happened in that woman's face when I pushed that paper back, and I am never going to be able to hate her again, and hating her was the only thing holding me up." Nobody spoke. "Now," Dot said, "somebody's going to tell me why a Parker is sitting in a nursing home on a Saturday with a 20-year-old ledger." Wanda said, "Dale's contesting the will." "Of course he is. He's saying the Carter girl exploited her." Dot Merriman sat back in her chair, and her mouth got very thin. "Dale Parker," she said, "was 29 years old when his brother died, and he stood in my kitchen 4 days after the funeral and asked me whether the family could sue, and I told him it was in Ruth's hands, and he said they better not settle cheap." Ethan's head came up. "And they didn't settle at all," Dot said. "His mother pushed $62,000 back across a table and never asked one soul in this family if that was all right with them." Ethan got back to town at 10:15 and found 9 missed calls. 6 were from Ruth. 2 were from a number he didn't know. 1 was from Emily Carter at 9:52, no message. He called Ruth first and regretted it. Cascade Valley pulled the forbearance. "It's the 24th. She's got until the 1st. "She had until the 1st, Ruth said. "Somebody called that bank yesterday afternoon and informed them that the party who had been curing the arrears is deceased and that the account is the subject of active litigation." Once a lender hears litigation, Ethan, they don't wait for the 1st. They accelerate. Dale called the bank. Somebody called the bank. Ruth. "Fern Ackerley wouldn't tell me who," Ruth said, "which tells you everything because Fern Ackerley has told me everything for 30 years. "How long does Emily have?" "The demand letter goes out Monday, $8,600, 30 days. 30 days. 30 days, and then it's a trustee sale. And in this county, that's another 90. And Ethan, I want you to hear the ugly part because you're going to hear it eventually." "Say it." "A trustee sale is a public auction and anybody can bid," Ruth said, "including a group out of Portland that has been buying parcels near the Q-op since March, including a man who has already told you to your face that he wants a building gone." The second unknown number called again at 10:40, and Ethan picked up on the second ring. It was a woman named Paulette from the Hawthorne Summer Fair Committee, and she was so uncomfortable that she got through most of it before Ethan understood what he was hearing. "We're not accusing anybody of anything," she said. "You're pulling her booth." "We're pausing her booth. She has been in that fair for 11 years. "Mr. Parker, I have had 4 phone calls since yesterday afternoon from people who do not want their children buying paintings from a woman who is, and I'm quoting, being sued by the Parker family for elder financial abuse. There is no such lawsuit." "There's a filing number," Paulette said. "Somebody put the filing number in the comments." Ethan stood in the middle of his grandmother's shop and heard himself ask a question in a voice he had never used before. "How many people have seen that post?" 1,100, Paulette said. "It's a town of 4,000. It was 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and Dale Parker's truck was parked outside the Rise and Shine on 3rd, and Ethan walked in the front door and sat down across from him in the booth without being asked. Dale did not look surprised. "You've been out to Cedar Glen," he said. "Word gets around. Dot Merriman is 900 years old, and she has never once kept her mouth shut about anything." "You called the bank." Dale picked up his coffee. "I did." Ethan had not expected him to say yes. It stopped him for a second. "You called a bank on a woman who buried her mother alone." "I called a bank about a delinquent note." "You knew who she was." Dale set the cup down. And for the first time since the Grange Hall, the polish came off that man's face entirely, and what was underneath it was 20 years old and had never been treated. "Ethan," he said, "I have known who that family was since you were in the 8th grade. Say her mother's name." "Rosalind Carter." "Say what she did." "She pulled out in front of my brother," Dale said, "on Route 9 on a Thursday at 4 in the afternoon, and she walked away and he did not, and the county gave her a piece of paper that said, 'Accident,' and my mother gave her $62,000 and a standing weekly order of white roses. She gave her the roses 20 years later, and she gave them to the daughter. You think that's a distinction?" Dale's hand came down flat on the table hard enough that 2 people at the counter turned around. You think that's a distinction, Ethan? My mother paid that family's mortgage, out of her own account. $400 a month, 36 months, and I sat at her kitchen table 16 months ago with her tax forms in my hand, and I saw the name Carter, and I said, "Mom, who is this?" And she took the papers out of my hands. She took them out of my hands like I was a child. So you burned her journals? I burned them, Dale said, because I read them first. The whole restaurant seemed to go quiet, though probably it didn't. You read them. Everyone from 1999 to 2003, Dale said. In one night, in my truck, in the alley. He was breathing hard now. You want to know what's in them? You want to know what my mother wrote in the year her son was killed? She wrote about the roses, page after page after page about who might be sending her flowers. 40 pages, Ethan. And you know how many pages she wrote about me? Ethan did not answer. 4, Dale said, in 5 years, and 2 of them were about money I owed her. Dale, so when you're sitting in that shop reading 31 journals with your name on the cover and you're feeling so understood, so seen, his voice went thin and ugly. You remember that I read the first 25 and my name isn't in them. Ethan sat there. That's why, he said. That's the whole thing. It was never about the building. It was about the building, too. No, it wasn't. It's about the fact that my mother had a limitless supply of it, Dale said, for grieving strangers, for a woman who killed her son, for a boy who mowed her lawn for you, Ethan for you, and I called that shop every Sunday for 9 years and got 4 minutes. It was 11:22. Did you ever ask her for more than 4 minutes? Ethan said. Dale opened his mouth, and nothing came out. Because I sat at that table every Sunday of my life, Ethan said, and I never once asked her a question about herself, not one. I ate her food and I fixed her porch step and I left before dark for 22 years. That woman raised me, and I did not know she had spent 14 months in 1999 trying to find out who was sending her flowers. I found that out yesterday, from a ledger, on the floor. Dale looked out the window. Don't, he said. You didn't get 4 minutes because you called, Ethan said. You got 4 minutes because you called instead of coming. Don't. I got the journals because I showed up on Sundays and didn't say anything. That's it. That's the whole difference between us, and it is not a very big one, and it does not make me better than you. Ethan leaned in. But you burned 25 years of her because you couldn't stand what was in them, and now you're taking a house off a woman who was 9 years old in the back seat, and Dale, that is where you and I stop being the same. Dale did not move for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, 9 years old. Ethan stopped. Dale turned back from the window. Something had changed in his face. What did you say? She was in the car, Ethan said. Emily, she was 9. It's on the second page of the report. There was no second page. Ruth has it. There was no second page in what I saw. Dale's coffee cup was shaking. I never saw the report. Nobody let me see the report. I was 29 and everybody in this family treated me like a problem to be managed, and Ruth Delaney told me it was in hand. He put both hands over his face for a second, and when he took them away, he was gray. There was a kid in that car. There was a kid in that car. Nobody told me there was a kid in the car. Would it have mattered? Dale looked at him, and for 1 second Ethan saw the whole cost of the last 24 hours arrive behind his uncle's eyes. Then Dale Parker put money on the table and stood up. I'll see you in court, he said. Dale. I said I'll see you in court. His voice cracked on the last word. I filed on Tuesday. I put it on the internet on Wednesday. 1,100 people, Ethan. You don't unring that. Don't you stand there and offer me a way to feel better about it, because there isn't one. And I have been drinking coffee in this booth since 7 o'clock this morning trying to find one. He walked out. He did not look back. It was 11:31, and Ethan Parker sat alone in a booth and understood that he had just watched a man lose an argument he had been having with his own mother for 20 years, and that winning it had cost him nothing, and had also not helped one single thing. He called Emily from the truck at 11:40. She picked up on the first ring. I called you, she said. I know, I'm sorry, it's been... The fair called me. Ethan closed his eyes. I heard. And a woman at the Shell station asked me if I was the one. Her voice was flat in a way he had not heard before. Not rude, just curious. Like I was a thing in the paper. Emily. And the bank called at 9. 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, which I did not know banks did. She laughed once. $8,600, 30 days. A man named Kurt read it to me off a screen and then said, "Have a good weekend." "I'm coming out there." "No. Emily." "Ethan, listen to me because I need to ask you something, and I need you to not be in my driveway when you answer it." A pause. He could hear her moving. "I went through my mother's things last night. All of them. Every box in the attic because I could not sleep because a man told me on my own porch that a dead woman had been paying my mortgage and I wanted to know if she knew." Ethan's hand tightened on the wheel. "Did she know?" he said. "I found her checkbook registers," Emily said. "She kept every one. She was that kind of person, she kept everything. And there's a stretch in 1999 and 2000 that I have been staring at since 2 o'clock this morning." Emily. "Every Friday," Emily said. 52 weeks, then 14 more, $22 and a delivery fee out of a woman who was working 2 jobs to a flower shop in this town." Ethan could not make himself say anything. "Your grandmother's flower shop," Emily said. "My mother was sending flowers to your grandmother's flower shop before I was in the 4th grade, and there's a note in the margin in her handwriting on the last one, and Ethan, I have read it 400 times and I do not understand it." "What does it say?" "It says no more." She looked at me. The line was quiet. "And then in the bottom of that same box," Emily said, and her voice finally went, "there is a newspaper clipping folded up so many times it's coming apart at the creases, and it is from February of 1999, and it has a photograph of a man in it, and he has your face." "Emily, who is Thomas Parker?" she said. It was 11:52 when Ethan told her the truth, and he did not do it on the phone. "Don't say anything else," he said. "Don't read me anything else. Put the box down and stay where you are." "Ethan, 25 minutes. Don't hang up on me." "I'm not hanging up on you," he said. "I'm coming out there so you don't have to hear this from a speaker." He drove Bellflower Road faster than he had ever driven it, and every mile of it was the same thought going around. She was 9. She was 9 and nobody ever told her. She was standing in the driveway when he pulled in. She had the clipping in her hand, and she had clearly been holding it the entire time, folded, unfolded, folded again. He got out. "Say it," she said. "Emily. You already know who he is. You knew before I finished the sentence. I heard it in your voice, so say it." "Thomas Parker was my father," Ethan said. Emily did not move. "He died in February of 1999 on Route 9, Ethan said. "He was 38. He was coming back from a job in Corvallis with lumber on the rack." "That's my mother's clipping," Emily said. "That's in my mother's box, under her tax folders. Why is a man from Route 9 in my mother's box?" "Emily. Why is he in my mother's box, Ethan?" "Because she was the other car," he said. It was 12:19. Emily Carter stood in her own driveway with a piece of newspaper in her hand and did not fall down and did not cry and did not say a word for 11 seconds, and Ethan counted them because he had nothing else to do with himself. Then she said, "No, I'm sorry." "No, you don't understand. That's not my mother was in a car accident in 1999. That's true, that happened, but nobody died." Her voice was climbing. "Nobody died. She told me. She said we were in an accident and a truck was involved and there was ice and everybody was fine. She said everybody was fine. She said it 100 times. She said it every single time I asked, and I asked for years, Ethan. I was a kid. I had nightmares. I asked her constantly." "I know." "She said everybody was fine." "She lied to you," Ethan said, "the same way my grandmother lied to me. They both did the exact same thing to their own kid, and neither one of them ever knew the other one was doing it." That was the sentence that took her legs. She sat down right there on the gravel hard, and Ethan went down on one knee beside her, and she was making a sound that was not crying, yet it was something underneath crying, and she got out 3 words. "I remember him." "Emily. I remember a face." She had the clipping crushed in her fist. "Ethan, I have remembered a man's face my whole life, through glass. I thought it was a dream. I told a therapist about it when I was 19. I said I have this recurring thing where a man is looking at me through a windshield and he looks so calm, and she said it was probably from a movie." Ethan could not speak. "He looked right at me," Emily said. "In the back seat. I was on the driver's side, and he looked at me, and then he turned his head, and then everything was noise." "Stop. Why did he look at me?" "Emily, stop. Why would a man in a wreck look at a kid in a back seat?" she said, and then it broke out of her all at once, 25 years of it, and she put her forehead down on her own knees in her own driveway and came apart. Ethan sat down in the gravel next to her and did not touch her and did not go anywhere. It was 12:41. Ruth Delaney's car came up the drive at 1:15, and Ruth got out with a file box on her hip and her mouth set like a woman who had already argued herself out of it twice on the way over. Emily was on the porch step by then with a wet dish towel over her face. "Miss Carter, you're the lawyer. I'm the lawyer. You're his lawyer." "I was his grandmother's lawyer for 32 years, Ruth said, "and I have crossed a line coming out here, and my professional association would have a great deal to say about it, and I have decided I don't care." She put the box down on the porch boards. "What is that?" Ethan said. "It's the file." "Ruth, 25 years I've kept this closed because a woman made me promise and that woman is dead, and there are now two people sitting on this porch who each have half of a thing that only makes sense whole." Ruth pushed her glasses up. "So we're opening it." "There's a police report in there," Emily said. "There is. With my name in it." "There is," Ruth said. "You were interviewed at the scene by a deputy named Alvin Reese, who is also dead, and you were 9 years old. And I want you to understand that nothing you said that day was your fault, and nothing you said that day changed anything." Emily took the towel off her face. "What did I say?" Ruth crouched down, which she was too old to do, and opened the box. "You said," she read, and her voice was very careful, "the man in the truck waved at me." Emily made a sound. "That's what a 9-year-old says," Ruth said. "The deputy wrote it down and moved on to the adults. But there was a witness, Miss Carter, and the witness statement is on page 4, and I need you both to hear it in the right order because I have had 25 years with this, and you've had 5 minutes. "Read it," Ethan said. "There was a man named Delbert Fry in a pickup 140 yards back," Ruth said. "He was the only person who saw the whole thing. He gave his statement at the hospital that night, and he gave a second one 9 days later because the insurance company asked him to, and both of them say the same thing." "Which is what?" Ruth put her finger on the line. "He said the truck had room," she said. Nobody breathed. "He said the Carter vehicle came out and stopped dead, stopped halfway into the lane, and that Thomas Parker had about a second and a half, and that a man in that position takes the front end. You take the engine block. You hit the front of the other car because that's where the metal is, and that's where nobody sits." Ruth's voice did not change, but her hand did. "And Delbert Fry said, and I am quoting a statement from March of 1999, he said that fellow went the other way. He turned into the ditch. There was a kid's face in that back window, and he turned into the ditch." Emily Carter put both hands flat on the porch. "He swerved," Ethan said. "He swerved," Ruth said. "He swerved away from the back seat." Away from the back seat. Ruth. "The truck rolled twice and went into a culvert, and Thomas Parker died on the way to Corvallis," Ruth said, "and the county ruled it an accident, and the insurance company paid, and Delbert Fry's statement went into a file in my office, and your grandmother read it at my kitchen table in the spring of 1999. It was 1:38. Emily said in a very small voice. "He waved at me." "He looked at you," Ruth said. "That's what a 9-year-old does with it." "He looked at me, and then he turned the wheel." "Yes." "He died because I was in the car." "No," Ethan said. "Yes." "No." He turned all the way toward her. "He died because a man made a decision in a second and a half, and that decision was the last thing he ever did. And if you sit here and turn that into your fault, you are taking the only thing my father ever got to be proud of and calling it a mistake." Emily looked at him. "Don't do that to him," Ethan said. "Please don't do that to him. He's been dead 25 years and that's all he's got." She put her hands over her mouth and nodded again and could not stop nodding. Ruth stood up and walked to the end of the porch and stayed there a while with her back to them, and neither of them said anything about it. At 2:10, Emily said, "Now say the rest." "There's more," Ruth said. "There's always more," Ethan said. "You said it yourself. She's been sitting on it since she got out of the car." Ruth came back. "Your mother," she said to Emily, "started sending flowers to Parker's garden house 11 days after the funeral, every Friday, 14 months. She declined to have her name on the card, and she paid $22 a week and a delivery fee doing it, and Margaret Parker spent the first 4 months of that trying to find out who it was so she could make them stop. My mother worked at the cannery and cleaned 2 offices at night," Emily said. $22 a week. "Yes, for 14 months. 66 weeks, Ruth said. "I've counted." "Why did she stop?" And Ethan said, "Because of March of 2000. Emily turned. "There was a settlement conference in Eugene," Ruth said. "Your mother's insurance carrier put $62,000 on the table. Both women were in the room. It was the first time they had ever been in the same room, and it was the last." "What happened?" "Margaret Parker looked at your mother for about 30 seconds, Ruth said, and then she pushed the paper back across the table and said, 'I don't want it.' And she got up and walked out, and I had to run to catch her in the parking lot." Emily's face had gone absolutely white. She refused it. She refused all of it. $62,000. "She had a mortgage on that shop until 2014, Ethan said. "She was 70 years old when she paid it off, and she had a cake." Emily got up. She went inside. Ethan heard a drawer and then another drawer, and then she came back out with a small ring binder falling apart at the spine, and she was already turning pages. "Read me the date," she said. "The conference." "March 9th, 2000. Emily found the page. She held it out with both hands like it weighed something. "March 10th, she said. "The last check. $22 and a delivery fee, and then in the margin in my mother's handwriting 3 words and a period." "No more," Ethan said. She looked at me. Emily nodded, and her eyes spilled over. "I thought it meant she got caught," she said. "That's what I thought at 2 o'clock this morning. I thought it meant somebody found out and my mother got embarrassed and quit. That's how well I knew her." Her voice went to pieces. "She looked at me. She meant a woman looked at her and didn't take her house." It was 2:33. They sat with it for a while. Then Emily said, "So the roses to me were guilt." "No," Ethan said. "Ethan, come on." "No. She sent me flowers for 3 years because my mother killed her son." "She sent you flowers for 3 years because you were the kid in the back seat," Ethan said, "and my father died turning the wheel to keep you alive, and then 25 years later you walked into her shop and you couldn't speak, and you were completely alone in the world, and she was 76 years old, and she had a shop full of flowers, and no way on God's earth to say any of it out loud." Emily was shaking her head. "Listen to me." He was up now. "That woman refused $62,000 from your mother when she had a mortgage. Whatever she was doing, she wasn't buying anything off. You cannot buy a thing off when you've already refused the receipt." "Then what was she doing?" "She was finishing it," Ruth said. Both of them looked at her. "He turned the wheel for a 9-year-old, Ruth said, "and then she watched that 9-year-old grow up in this town from a distance for 25 years. And one day, that grown woman walked into her shop with nobody in the world left, and Margaret Parker decided that her son's last decision was not going to be wasted." Emily sat down on the step. "That's why my name," Ethan said. "That's the whole thing. It was never a matchmaking scheme. She put my name on those cards because it was his name too." Ruth closed the file box. "Thomas Ethan Parker," she said. "It's on the birth certificate. It's on the second page of that report." It was 3:01 in the afternoon. Emily went inside and came back out with the shoebox of 156 cards and set it on the porch between them, and neither of them opened it. "Okay," she said. "Okay, then I can't keep the house." "Emily, no, listen to me now because I've been trying to get to this since noon." She wiped her face with the flannel sleeve. "Every dollar of that money came out of a woman whose son died in a ditch because my mother stopped in the wrong lane. I can't stand on this porch and say thank you. There isn't a version of that sentence that works." "She would climb out of the ground," Ruth said. "Then let her." "Emily." $8,600 in 30 days, Emily said. "I have $1,100 in a booth I just got pulled from. It's not a moral question anyway. It's arithmetic. I lose it either way. I just get to decide whether I lose it feeling like a person or feeling like a debt." Ethan said, "I have $11,000. "No." "Emily, listen." "No." She stood up. "That's her money." "It's my money." "It is exactly her money. It is the last of her, and you want to hand it to the Carters." Emily's voice cracked. "Do you hear yourself? Do you know what that would do to your uncle? He is already telling this whole town. I bled that woman dry, and you want to walk into a bank on Monday and pay my mortgage with her account." Ruth said quietly, "She's right about that part." "Thank you," Emily said. "She's right about the optics and she's wrong about everything else," Ruth said. "But she's right about the optics." Ethan drove home at 4:30 and did not go home. He went to the shop instead and sat in the dark on the stool behind the register with the green ledger in his lap and read the last Friday she ever wrote down. Friday, 1 dozen white roses. Carter E. from Ethan. He said out loud to the empty room, "You should have told me." The cooler hummed. 22 years of Sundays, he said. You had 22 years of Sundays. At 8 the next morning, Sunday, Wanda found him asleep in the chair by the cooler, with a pen still in his hand and 4 pages of numbers in front of him. "Ethan Parker." "I've got it," he said. "You've got what?" "11,000 from her account. Truck's worth about 9, I'd take 7 to move it fast. That's 18. He was still half asleep and talking fast. "Bank wants 8.6. That clears it and leaves 10 to catch her up on taxes and get her through the winter, and I can work out of Ray's Ford until spring." Wanda took the pen out of his hand. "Ethan." "What?" "You are not selling your truck." "It's a truck." "It's how you eat," Wanda said. "You hang drywall. You are proposing to hang drywall without a vehicle in a county with no bus." "I'll figure it out." That's what she used to say. Wanda sat down on the bucket across from him. "That is exactly what she used to say, and I heard it for 22 years, and I want you to hear how it sounds coming back at you." He rubbed his face. "And," Wanda said, "she won't take it. She'll take it if it's already done. Ethan Parker, that woman has been kept alive for 3 years by somebody doing things behind her back," Wanda said. "You want to fix this by doing one more thing behind her back." That stopped him cold. Wanda got up and turned on the coffee. "Now," she said, "Ruth called me at 7. She said if you were here, I was to tell you the account's a problem." "What account?" "Your grandmother's account, the 11,000. Ethan was already standing. "I was at Ruth's office at 9 on a Sunday, because Ruth Delaney had lived above her own office since 1998, and she came down in a cardigan and let him in, and did not make him ask. They froze it Friday afternoon," she said. "Who did?" "Nobody did anything wrong. It's automatic." Ruth put her glasses on. "Once a will is contested, the estate assets are held pending. Dale's filing did it. The 11,000 is estate property, and it is not going anywhere until this is resolved, and this will not be resolved for a minimum of 6 months and possibly a year." Ethan stood in the middle of a lawyer's office at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning and laughed one flat sound with nothing in it. "He filed on Tuesday," he said. "He filed on Tuesday." "He called the bank on Friday." "Yes. So the money that could pay it is locked because he filed, and the payment is due because he called." Ethan's voice was very quiet. He didn't even have to be smart. He just had to do 2 things in the right order. "I don't believe he planned it," Ruth said. "I don't care what he planned." "You should," Ruth said, "because that's the difference between a man who's cruel and a man who's grieving badly and one of those you can talk to." "He's not grieving. He's collecting." "Ethan." He read her journals from 1999 to 2003 in his truck in an alley, Ethan said, and then he burned them because his name was in them 4 times, and 2 of those were about money he owed her. That's what he told me in a booth at the Rise and Shine. He looked me in the face and told me that. Ruth took her glasses off slowly. "He told you that?" "Yes." "He told you he read them?" "Yes." Ruth sat down. "Then he knows about Route 9, she said. "He's always known about Route 9. Dot said he asked about suing 4 days after the funeral." "No." Ruth's hand had gone to the arm of the chair. "He knows what your grandmother wrote about Route 9. Ethan, she wrote it down. That woman wrote down everything every night of her life in a notebook. Whatever she thought in the parking lot in Eugene, whatever she thought the first Friday those roses came, whatever she thought the day Dot Merriman put that name on the counter, it was in those books. And they're ash. And he read them first," Ruth said. "He is the only living human being who knows what Margaret Parker actually thought about that accident, and he burned the proof, and then he walked into a courthouse and filed a paper calling that girl a predator." It was 9:22. "He knew," Ethan said. "He knew she wasn't taking anything. He read 3 years of it, and he knew. He knew 25 years of it. Then why?" Ruth looked at him for a long moment. "Because 4 pages in 25 years is a wound," she said, "and a wound will let a man do almost anything." Emily called at 11:40 that Sunday morning. "I did something," she said. "Emily, I need you to not be angry." "What did you do?" "I called the bank back." A breath. "I asked Kurt what the actual number is if I want to keep the house instead of just curing the arrears. Not the 8.6, the whole thing, the payoff." Ethan closed his eyes. "What is it?" 31,400. "Okay." "And then I called the Portland group," Emily said. Ethan stood up so fast, the chair went back into the wall. You what? There's a number on the postcard they mailed everybody on this road in March, Emily said. Everybody out here got one. Land Acquisitions Cascade something a man named Trevor. I've had it on the refrigerator since spring and I've walked past it 1,000 times. Emily, tell me you did not call that man. I called him. Emily. He offered me $192,000 for the parcel in the house, she said. 15-day close. He said it like he was reading it off a card. Ethan, he didn't even have to look it up. And then he said, "We're glad you called. We've been interested in your property for some time." Ethan put his hand on the wall. "You'd walk with 160, he said. "I'd walk with 160. "That's your mother's house." "It's a house my mother couldn't afford, that a stranger has been holding up for 3 years without telling me in a town where 1,100 people saw my name in a lawsuit on Wednesday." Her voice was climbing. "I sat in that kitchen at 4 this morning, and I could not think of one single reason to stay. Give me 1 week. To do what? I don't know yet. That's not a plan, that's a feeling." Emily. "Ethan, I'm not a project," she said, and that landed like a hand on the chest. "Your grandmother made me a project for 3 years and she loved me, and it still turned my whole life into something that was happening to me instead of something I was doing. And now you're standing there about to do the exact same thing with a truck and an $11,000 account, and I know you are because Wanda called me at 8:30. "Wanda called you?" "Wanda calls everybody," Emily said. "It's a town of 4,000 people." He laughed, and it surprised him, and then she laughed too wetly, and for about 4 seconds it was almost bearable. "I told him I'd think about it," she said. Trevor, I told him I'd call Tuesday." Tuesday, she said. "That's the week you get Ethan. You get 2 days." It was 11:58 on a Sunday morning, and Ethan Parker had 48 hours and no money, and a frozen account, and a truck worth $7 if he took a beating on it. He spent Sunday afternoon on the phone and got nowhere. The credit union would not write a personal loan against inherited property in litigation. Fern Ackerley said she was sorry 3 times and meant it every time. 2 contractors he had worked for offered him $100 each, and one of them cried on the phone about Margaret and could not finish the conversation. At 6, he sat down on the front step of the shop with his head in his hands. At 6:40, a car he didn't recognize slowed on 3rd Street, stopped, and backed up. Paulette from the fair committee got out. "I've been driving past here for an hour," she said. "Paulette, I need to tell you something and then I'm going to leave because if I stand here I'll lose my nerve." She had her arms crossed hard. "I pulled that girl's booth on a phone call and I did not check one single thing." "I know. I've been in the flower shop's Christmas raffle for 19 years, Paulette said. "Your grandmother put my mother's casket spray together in 2011 and charged me $40 for $400 worth of lilies and told me the register was broken." Ethan looked up. "The register was never broken," he said. "The register was never broken," Paulette said, "and I have been sitting in my kitchen since yesterday thinking about the fact that I took a phone call from Dale Parker and did to that woman exactly what nobody ever did to me." She got back in her car. Then she rolled the window down. "That post has 240 comments," she said. "I read every one. Do you know how many of them are from people who actually met Margaret Parker?" "How many?" 11, Paulette said, "and every single one of the 11 is asking Dale to take it down." It was 7:15 on Sunday night when Ethan locked the shop, and he had his hand on the deadbolt when a truck pulled into the alley behind him. He knew the engine before he turned around. Dale Parker got out and stood there with the door open and the dome light on, and he did not have his suit on, and he had not shaved, and he looked like a man who had been driving for a while with nowhere to go. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "Then what?" "I went out to Cedar Glen this afternoon." Ethan let go of the door. "Dot Merriman is 91, Dale said, and she made me sit in a chair like I was 12, and she told me about a parking lot in Eugene, and she told me what my mother said, and I have been driving around this county for 4 hours. "Dale." 9 years old, Dale said. His voice was not steady. "In the back seat, on the driver's side." "Yes." And Tom turned the wheel. Ethan did not answer. He didn't have to. Dale reached back into the cab and came out with something and held it against his chest for a second before he could make himself walk it over. It was a spiral notebook warped along one edge, the cover scorched black in a half moon, and the pages fanned and buckled the way paper goes when it has been wet and then dried badly. "There were 5 boxes, Dale said. "Not 4. Ethan stopped breathing. "I put 4 in the barrel," Dale said, "and there was one on the passenger seat, and it's been under the back seat of my truck since Tuesday, and I have taken it out and put it back 9 times. He held it out. "It's 1999, he said. Ethan took it. He did not say thank you, and Dale did not wait for it. The two of them went inside without a word, and Ethan put the notebook down on the counter under the light, and neither of them touched it for a full minute. "It's warped," Ethan said. "It got wet. I had a case of water back there, and it went over on the road out to Cedar Glen." Dale's voice was flat. "Some of it's gone. Maybe a third." "Which third?" "I don't know. I never opened it after Tuesday." "You said you read them all." "I read them in the truck on Tuesday night before I burned them," Dale said, "and this one I could not finish, and that's why it ended up on the seat instead of in the box, and I have spent 6 days telling myself it was an accident." It was 7:22 on Sunday night. Ethan opened it. The first page was January of 1999, and it was nothing. Cooler compressor. A wedding in Sweet Home. $40 short on the water bill. His grandmother had been 63 years old and had no idea what was coming. He turned pages until he found the one where the handwriting stopped being handwriting. February 18th. 4 words gouged so hard they came through the other side. "They took my son." Ethan closed his eyes. The next 12 pages were blank. Then in March, 1 line. "Wanda comes at 6 and opens for me. I sit in the back. I cannot look at anybody's face." Then 6 days later. "The boy stacked 90 chairs. Nobody asked him to. I watched him from the kitchen door, and I did not go out there and stop him, and I will answer for that." Ethan put his hand flat on the page. "That's you," Dale said. "I know. You were 14. "I remember the chairs," Ethan said. "I don't remember anybody watching." Dale sat down on the stool by the register, the same stool his mother had sat on for 40 years, and Ethan noticed that he did it carefully, like a man sitting in a pew he had no business in. They found the roses in April. "Somebody sent me flowers today. White roses, 12, no card. I called the wire service and a girl told me the sender declined, and I said declined, and she said yes, ma'am, and I said put your manager on." Then a week later. "They came again. Then. They came again. I put them in the cooler with the funeral stock. I am not putting my son's death in a vase on my table." Then in June. 11 weeks. Whoever this is, they are not going to stop, and I have started standing at that window on Friday mornings, and I hate myself for it. Ethan turned the page, and half of it was gone. The ink run to gray clouds, and he could make out 3 words at the bottom. "Somebody out there." "That's the water," Dale said. "Yeah. That's the part I'd give my right hand for, and it's the part that's gone." It was 7:51. They read for another hour. Ethan read out loud because it turned out neither of them could do it silently with another man in the room. He read the entry where she wrote, "I am angry at God, and I am angry at the ice, and I am angry at Tom for driving on a Thursday, which is not a thing a sane woman thinks, and I think it every day." He read the one where she wrote, "Ruth showed me the report. There was a witness. I read it twice, and then I put it face down and asked her to keep it, because if I keep it, I will read it every night for the rest of my life." He read the one from September that said, "Fry says he turned the wheel. He says there was a child's face in the back window. I have not told Ethan, and I am not going to. He is 14, and he does not need to know that his father chose. A boy needs a father who was taken, not a father who decided." Dale said quietly, "She was wrong about that." "She was wrong about that," Ethan said. And then he turned the page and found his uncle. He read the first line and stopped. "What?" Dale said. "Nothing. Ethan, it's from October. Read it." "Dale, I burned 4 boxes of my mother," Dale said. "Read it." Ethan read it. Dale came by. He wanted to know about the lawsuit. He asked whether we could get more than the offer, and I said, "We are not doing that." And I said it the way I would say it to a dog on a table. His face. I have been thinking about his face for 4 hours. He is not a greedy man. He is a frightened man who has learned that money is the only way anybody in this family ever says anything to him. That is my doing. When his father died, I gave Tom the shop and I gave Dale a check, and I told myself it was because Tom was the one who wanted it, and it was also easier. I have 2 sons, and I buried the one I knew how to talk to. The shop was very quiet. Dale Parker sat on that stool with both hands on his knees and did not make a sound, and after a while Ethan realized his uncle's shoulders were going and put the notebook down and looked at the wall until it passed. 4 pages, Dale said finally. "I told you 4 pages in 25 years. I know what you told me." I read fast, Ethan. I read 5 years of that woman in one night in a truck in an alley, and I was counting. I was actually counting. His voice went ragged. And I stopped counting in 2001 because I got to a number I didn't like and I threw the whole box in the barrel. How many was it? I don't know. Dale. 19, he said. 19, and I was only halfway through 2001. It was 9:06 on Sunday night. Ethan closed the notebook. "Why'd you bring it?" he said. "Because Dot Merriman told me about a parking lot in Eugene." "That's not an answer." "Because I sat in my truck outside Cedar Glen this afternoon," Dale said, "and I did the thing I've been not doing since Tuesday, which is I asked myself what my mother would have said if she'd walked out that back door and seen me putting her notebooks in a barrel. And I couldn't come up with anything she'd say. That's the thing. I couldn't come up with a single sentence. She'd have said, 'Put those down.' No, she wouldn't." Dale wiped his face with the flat of his hand. "She'd have stood there and looked at me and gone back inside, and I would have had to live in that for the rest of my life, and I'm going to anyway." Ethan let that sit. Then he said, "There's something else in you. Say it." "What?" "You've been in here 2 hours and you've been holding something back the whole time. You've got the same face you had at the Grange Hall." Dale stood up. "I need you to hear this from me," he said. "Dale, in March, the Portland group asked me for names," Dale said. "Not the shop, land. They wanted anything out past the co-op with an owner who might be soft. Owners who were behind owners who were old owners who were alone." Ethan went very still. "And I gave them a list," Dale said. 11 names. Say the 12th. There wasn't a 12th. Say the name Dale. "Carter," Dale said. "I put Carter on that list, in March, because I had seen my mother's bank statement 16 months ago, and I knew that property was underwater, and I told a man in a conference room in Portland that there was a parcel on Bellflower Road with a woman on it who was 4 months behind." Ethan came out from behind that counter so fast the stool went over. "She has a postcard on her refrigerator," he said. "I know. She has had it on her refrigerator since March. Dale, she's walked past it 1,000 times, and yesterday she picked up the phone and called that number because she was out of options. And the man on the other end said, 'We've been interested in your property for some time.'" "I know. You put her on a list." "I put her on a list," Dale said, "in March before I knew there was a kid in the car, before Dot Merriman told me about a parking lot, and it is going to be true for the rest of my life no matter what I do on Monday." Ethan wanted to hit him. He stood 4 feet away from his uncle in his grandmother's shop and wanted it so badly his hands ached. "Get out," he said. "Ethan, get out of her shop." Dale went. He stopped in the doorway. "The notebook's yours," he said. "I know whose it is." "That's not what I mean." Dale's hand was on the frame. "I mean, I'm not asking for it back, and I'm not asking you to tell her I brought it. If you use it against me, use it." It was 9:40 on Sunday night, and Emily Carter had until Tuesday, and Ethan Parker sat on the floor of the shop with a warped notebook and did not sleep at all. At 6:10 Monday morning, he was in her driveway. She came out barefoot with a cardigan over the flannel and her hair up wrong and said, "It's 6 in the morning." "I know. Ethan, I brought you something and I'm going to hand it to you, and then I'm going to go sit in the truck," he said, "because I am not standing over you while you read it." She looked at the notebook in his hands. She saw the burn. "That's from the barrel." "There were 5 boxes," Ethan said. "Not 4. He brought me the 5th one last night." "Dale brought you." "Dale brought me 1999. Emily took it with both hands. "I don't want to read your grandmother writing about my mother," she said. "Then don't." "Ethan, I mean it. I'm not doing to you what she did to me. I'm not deciding what you can carry." He put his keys in his pocket. "It's yours to open or not. I'll be in the truck for however long." She stood there. Then she said, "Come inside. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it with coffee, and I'm not going to do it alone." It was 6:31. She read for 40 minutes and did not say one word. Ethan sat across the kitchen table from her and watched her face go through it, and twice she pressed her hand over her mouth, and once she got up and stood at the sink with her back to him for a while, and then came back and picked it up again. At 7:14, she said, "There's a page missing." "The water got about a third of it." "No, I mean there's a page missing." She turned it toward him. "It's torn out. Look at the stub." Ethan looked. She was right. 2 pages gone at the gutter, cut close and clean, and it was not fire and it was not water. "That's not Dale," Ethan said slowly. Dale would have burned the whole thing. Then who? She did. Emily looked up. She tore something out of her own notebook, Ethan said, and kept the rest. What's the date on the next page? March 11th, 2000. Emily's cup came down. The conference was March 9th, she said. The conference was March 9th. She tore out the parking lot, Emily said. She tore out the 2 days that had my mother in them. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Emily turned back one page to March 8th, the last night before it, and read out loud, and her voice went thin as paper. Tomorrow I sit in a room with the woman who was driving. Ruth says I do not have to look at her. Ruth is a good lawyer and a stupid woman. I have been looking at her every Friday for 14 months. I have just never seen her face. Emily set it down. They're both gone, she said. Yeah. Both of them are gone, and neither one of them told the truth to their own kid, and now it's just us sitting in a kitchen holding the pieces. Yeah, Ethan said. That's it. That's what you've got. Emily, I've been up for 2 days. I know. She rubbed her eyes. I know. I'm sorry. I'm not fighting with you. I'm fighting with 2 dead women, and you're the only one in the room. It was 7:52. There's one more thing, Ethan said, and after I say it, you're going to want to throw me out. Say it. Dale gave your name to the Portland group in March. Emily's hands stopped. He gave them 11 names, Ethan said. Owners out past the co-op who were behind or old or alone. He had seen my grandmother's bank statements, and he knew you were 4 months down. That postcard on your refrigerator is on your refrigerator because of my uncle. She got up and went to the refrigerator and took the postcard off it and looked at it. Trevor, she said. Emily. I called him. She laughed one horrible sound. I sat in this kitchen at 4 a.m. and I thought at least this one is mine. At least I found this one myself. She put the card down. Nothing that has happened to me in 3 years has been mine. Not one thing. That stops today. Don't. It stops today, Ethan said, because I have an idea, and I'm going to tell it to you before I do any of it. And you get to say no, and if you say no, I will not do it. That's the whole difference, and it's the only thing I've got to offer you. Emily crossed her arms. Talk, she said. Ruth Delaney opened her office at 8:30 on Monday and found both of them sitting on the steps. Well, she said. Ruth, how far back do the shop's books go? Ethan said. That's Wanda's department. 1986, Emily said. He already asked her. He asked her at 7:55 from my kitchen. Ruth unlocked the door. And why are we interested in 1986? Because the register was broken, Ethan said. Ruth stopped with the key in her hand. 40 years, Ethan said. Every time somebody couldn't pay, my grandmother told them the register was broken and wrote it in the book anyway. Paulette Ostrander, 2011, $400 of lilies for a casket spray charged $40. Wanda says there's a page from 1994 with the corner folded down that made her walk outside. Ruth, that woman, didn't forgive those bills. She recorded them, every single one 40 years in her own hand. Ruth pushed the door open slowly. You want to collect on them? No. Then what? I want to show them to people, Ethan said. It was 8:41 on Monday morning. Ruth sat down behind her desk without taking her coat off. Say the rest. There are 1,100 people in this town who read a Facebook post on Wednesday and decided who Emily Carter is, Ethan said. And there are, I don't know, 400 or 500 people in those ledgers who found out one day at a counter who Margaret Parker was. Those are the same town, Ruth. That's the same 4,000 people. You want to open the books. I want to make one phone call to every name in them, Ethan said. And I want to say my grandmother carried you in April of 1997, and I'm not asking for the money. I'm asking you to know what she was actually like before you believe what my uncle said about the woman she spent her last 3 years on. Ruth took her glasses off. They'll pay, she said. Some will. Ethan, half this county will empty a coffee can on that counter. That's not the plan. It's what will happen. I know, Ethan said, and that's why I'm not doing it unless she says do it. Both of them turned. Emily was standing by the door with her arms still crossed. No, she said. Ruth said Miss Carter. No. Emily's jaw was set. I have been the town charity case for 3 years without even knowing it. You want me to be the town charity case out loud on purpose in public on Main Street, Nome. Emily. Do you know what that is? She said. That's a woman standing in a flower shop while strangers hand her money and look at her face to see if she's grateful enough. I have 35 years of pride, and it is the only thing I did not lose in the last 3 years, and I would like to keep it." "Then keep it," Ethan said. Keep it. Don't take $1. He stood up. "But you don't get to decide what those people think about my grandmother." Emily's mouth opened. "You want to say no to the money, say no to the money," he said. "That's yours. But 1,100 people believe she was a senile old woman who got taken by a con artist, and I'm not leaving that standing, and I'd be doing it if you'd never called me back." Emily said nothing for a long moment. "That's a low trick," she said. "It's not a trick. It's a low trick, and it worked, and I'm angry about it." She uncrossed her arms. "Fine. Make the calls. About her, not about me. About her. And Ethan." She looked right at him. "If anybody hands me anything, I'm going to say no in front of them. I'm not doing it quietly. I've had 3 years of quiet." "Good," Ethan said. "Don't good me." "I meant it." Ruth said, "It's 8:53 on a Monday, and I have a demand letter going out of Cascade Valley in 7 minutes, and neither of you has asked the only question that matters." They both looked at her. "Miss Carter," Ruth said, "what are you going to tell Trevor tomorrow?" Emily did not answer. Wanda Hollis opened the shop at 9 and had the first ledger down before her coat was off. 1994, she said. "That's where I start. That's my page with the corner folded." "Whose is it?" Ethan said. "Mine." He looked up. $260, Wanda said. "My husband's service. I was 3 months in on this job, and I told her to take it out of my check, and she said the register was broken, and she wrote it down anyway, and I never knew until Friday when I opened that book on the floor and saw it." Her chin went. 32 years, Ethan. I sat next to that woman for 22 of them, and she never said one word about it, and she wrote it down so it would exist somewhere." Wanda. "So I'm calling the 1990s, she said, "and I'll thank you not to argue with me about it." Paulette Ostrander showed up at 9:40 with a legal pad and a box of donuts nobody ate and said, "Give me the 2000s. At 10:15, Dot Merriman called from Cedar Glen and asked for the 1980s, and when Wanda said, "Dot, honey, you can't hold a phone that long," Dot said, "I have a landline, a chair, and nothing else to do. Wanda Hollis, give me 1986. It was 10:22. The first person through the door was a man named Cleve Barlow, 71, who had driven in from CO because Dot Merriman had called him at 9:50. He put a $100 bill on the counter and Ethan pushed it back. "Son." "Mr. Barlow, that's not what the call was about." 1988, Cleve said. "My wife had a stroke on a Tuesday, and I came in here on a Saturday because I did not know what else to do with my hands, and your grandmother built me an arrangement and put it in my truck and would not take a dime, and when I tried to give her money, she told me the register was broken, and I have known for 37 years that the register was not broken." He pushed the bill back. "I have had this conversation in my head since 1988. I'd appreciate it if you'd let me have it." Ethan took the $100. By 11, there were 6 people in the shop. By noon, there were 19, and Wanda had run out of chairs, and a woman Ethan had never met was standing by the cooler, telling a woman he had known his whole life about the day Margaret Parker had driven 40 miles to a graveside in Lebanon with an arrangement nobody had paid for. At 12:19, the door opened, and Emily Carter walked in. The shop went quiet in a way that was worse than noise. 19 people looked at her. Ethan watched her take it, the whole weight of it all at once in one breath, and he watched her decide not to run. "Hello," she said. Nobody said anything. "My name is Emily Carter." Her voice shook and she kept going. "I'm the woman from the Post." A man near the window looked at the floor. "I want to say 2 things, and then I'll get out of your way." She had both hands closed. "The first one is that I did not know. Whatever you read on Wednesday, whatever anybody told you, I did not know that Margaret Parker was paying anything toward my house until a man told me on my own porch last Thursday, and I have not slept since." Somebody said, "Honey." "Don't," Emily said. "Please let me finish." The shop waited. "The second thing is that I'm not taking anybody's money," she said. "I know why you're here today, and I know what's on that counter, and I want you to hear me say it in front of all of you, so nobody has to wonder. I'm not taking it. It's not because I'm proud, it's because I'm out of ways to be a person things happen to." Nobody moved. Then Cleve Barlow said, "Ma'am, that money's not for you." Emily turned. "That's a 1988 bill," Cleve said. "That's mine. I've been carrying it 37 years. Where it goes after it leaves my hand is none of my business." It was 12:26 on Monday afternoon, Emily Carter stood in the middle of Parker's garden house with her mouth open and nothing coming out of it, exactly the way she had stood there 3 years before, and this time 20 people watched it happen. Wanda came around this counter and put a hand on her back and said, "Sit down before you go over," and Emily sat down on the bucket in the back room and put her face in her hands, and Wanda stood in the doorway so nobody could see her do it. Dale Parker's retraction went up at 4:11 that afternoon. Ethan read it on Ruth's phone. It was 8 sentences long and there was nothing clever in it. He wrote that his mother had not been exploited by anyone. He wrote that the money she gave had been given freely and that he had known that when he filed. He wrote the name Emily Carter twice and said she had done nothing. He wrote that he had filed on Tuesday out of grief and anger at his mother and not out of anything he could defend. He wrote at the end that he was withdrawing the contest and that he would not be commenting further. He did not ask anyone to forgive him, and he did not explain himself. 240 comments on the first one, Ruth said. "Do you know how many that post gets?" "How many?" 900 by tonight, Ruth said. "And it doesn't matter, because the 1,100 people who read Wednesday already read Wednesday. That's how it works." But he did it. He did it. "Ethan, do you understand what he just did to himself in a town of 4,000 people?" "Yes. He's going to buy his gas in Albany for the rest of his life." "I know," Ethan said. Ruth's office phone rang at 4:30, and it was Fern Ackerley at the credit union, and Ruth listened for 90 seconds and then took her glasses off. "The contest is withdrawn as of 3:50, she said. "The estate account releases in 5 business days." 11,000, Ethan said. 11,040. Against 8-6. "Against 8-6, Ruth said. "The arrears are covered the minute that clears, and the forbearance renews, and Miss Carter goes back to a $400 payment she cannot make in November." "Then we get to November," Ethan said. At 6 that evening, Ethan drove out to Bellflower Road, and Emily was on the porch step with a coffee gone cold beside her, and the ledger from 1994 open in her lap, because Wanda had sent it home with her and would not take no for an answer. "You're going to wear that page out," Ethan said. $260, Emily said, "for Wanda's husband, in 1994. "I know. There are 412 of these," she said. Paulette counted at 3 o'clock. 412 times in 40 years, that woman wrote down a debt she never intended to collect. "Emily, why write it down?" She looked up. "That's what I can't get past. If you're never going to collect, why write it down at all?" Ethan sat down on the step below hers. "Because she wanted somebody to know," he said. "Someday, not then, someday." "That's a lonely way to live." "It's the only way she knew how." Emily closed the ledger. "Trevor's expecting a call at 10 tomorrow, she said. "I know. $160,000, Ethan. Clear. I've never had 4 figures in a bank account in my life." "I know. Say something." "No," Ethan said. "No what?" "You don't get to make me carry it." He turned around and looked at her. "You said it in Ruth's office this morning, and you were right, and I've thought about it all day. You've had 3 years of other people deciding things about your life while you were asleep. I'm not doing one more. I'm not telling you to keep it, and I'm not telling you to sell it, and I'm not making a face while you decide." Emily stared at him. "That's the most annoying thing anybody's ever done to me," she said. "Yeah, I wanted you to talk me into it." "I know," Ethan said. It was 6:52. She was quiet a long time. "Can I say the ugly thing again?" she said. "Go ahead." "If I sell, I never have to think about any of this again." Her voice went low. "I take $160,000, and I go to Bend or Boise or anywhere, and I paint, and nobody there knows that a man died turning a wheel because I was 9 years old and sitting on the driver's side. It just stops. It stops being a thing about me." "That's not ugly. It's ugly." "Emily, that's the most reasonable sentence anybody's said in a week." "Then why does it feel like running?" "Because it is," Ethan said, "and because running's allowed." She laughed. It came out wrecked. "You are so bad at this," she said. "I've been told." At 10:03 on Tuesday morning, Emily Carter called Trevor Lindquist of Cascade Ridge Land Partners from her own kitchen on speaker with Ethan Parker, standing across the room where she had told him to stand. "Miss Carter." Trevor was cheerful. "Good morning. I've got the paperwork queued up on my end. We can be closed by the 8th. "Mr. Lindquist, how did you get my name?" A pause exactly 1 second too long. "I'm sorry." In March, you mailed a postcard to every address on Bellflower Road, which is fine, that's business. But you told me on Sunday that you'd been interested in my property for some time, so I'm asking how you got my name. Miss Carter, we do a great deal of parcel research. You got it from Dale Parker. Another pause. I'm not able to discuss our sourcing. That's all right, Emily said. You just did. Ethan watched her hand shake and watched her keep her voice flat. Here's the thing, Mr. Lindquist. On Sunday, I was going to say yes. I want you to know that because I don't want to sound braver than I am. On Sunday at 4 a.m, I was going to take your $192,000 and be gone by the 8th. And today I found out that the reason you know my name is that a man in this town looked at a list of people who were behind on their notes and thought that one's alone, she'll be easy. Her voice did not rise. And I have spent 3 years being the person on that list, Mr. Lindquist. I have been the woman it was safe to do things to, and I am not doing it one more time, not even for $160,000, and especially not on the 8th. Miss Carter, if it's about the number. It's not about the number. We have some flexibility to 200. Mr. Lindquist, Emily said, I'm going to hang up now, and then I'm going to be sick, and then I'm going to go outside and look at a house I can't afford. Thank you for your time. She hung up. She put both hands flat on the counter and breathed. $200,000, she said. Yeah. I just hung up on $200,000. Yeah. Ethan, I have $1,100. I know. Say something helpful. That's the first thing that's been yours in 3 years, Ethan said. Emily Carter put her head down on her own kitchen counter and cried for about a minute and a half, and then she stood up, wiped her face, and said, Okay, what's November look like? It was 10:19 on Tuesday morning, and the answer it turned out was that nobody in Hawthorne, Oregon was going to let November happen. By Friday, the counter money was $4,300, and every dollar of it came attached to a year and a name, and Wanda wrote everyone down in a fresh book, because that was how it was done in that building. By the following Wednesday, the estate account cleared, and Ruth walked $8,600 into Cascade Valley Bank herself and made Kurt print a receipt. But the thing that actually changed it was not the money. On the second Saturday, Paulette Ostrander called Emily and offered her the booth back, and Emily said no. You said no, Ethan said. I said no to the booth, Emily said. I asked for the wall. What wall? The wall inside the pavilion where they hang the quilt show, she said. It's 40 feet and nobody's used it for painting in 11 years, and I asked if I could hang 43 pieces on it instead of standing behind a table under a canopy looking hopeful. And Paulette said yes before I finished the sentence because Paulette Ostrander would currently give me her car. Emily Carter sold 31 paintings at the Hawthorne Summer Fair in 2 days at prices. She set herself after Wanda Hollis looked at her old price list and said the word 40 out loud in a tone that ended the discussion. 6 of them went to a woman from Portland who ran a gallery in the Pearl District and who had come down for the weekend for the corn. By October, the arrears were gone, and the note was current, and there was a show scheduled for February. By November, Emily Carter made a $400 mortgage payment out of her own checking account for the first time in her adult life, and she drove into town afterward and stood in the flower shop and told Wanda about it, and Wanda had to go in the back. The lawsuit was never refiled. Dale Parker did not come to the shop for 4 months. He came the first Friday in December at 7 a.m. before it opened and knocked on the alley door. Ethan let him in. I'm not staying, Dale said. You never are. I've got a thing at 9 in Salem. He stood in the middle of the back room with his hands in his coat. I wanted to give you this, and I didn't want to do it in front of anybody. He put an envelope on the workbench. Dale. It's $9,000, he said. It's the option money Cascade Ridge paid me in March on the corner. I've been sitting on it since the summer, and I couldn't figure out where to put it. And then I thought, that's the stupidest sentence a man ever thought. Of course you know where to put it. She won't take it. I know she won't take it. It's not for her. Dale's mouth moved. It's for the shop. Fix the compressor. Fix the roof over the cooler. It's been going since I was in high school. Keep the sign up. Ethan looked at the envelope. You want your name on it? God, no. Dale. Put down that the register was broken, Dale said, and walked out. Ethan stood there a while. Then he opened the new book, and on the first line of December in his own handwriting, he wrote the date and the amount and the words. Register broken. DP. 1 year later, on a Friday morning in July, Parker's garden house was still standing on the corner of Main and 3rd, and the sign still said Margaret's name because a man named Ethan Parker had been told by 412 people that it had better. The cooler ran quiet now. The roof over it did not leak. There was a new floor in the front because a contractor named Ray Halloran had shown up one Sunday with 3 men and would not explain himself past the year 1996, and there was a table by the window that had not been there before. It was a plain thing, 4 feet, built out of Douglas fir by a man who framed houses for a living, and on it there were cards and pens and a small wooden box, and above it, hand-painted on a piece of board by a woman who did not sign it, 4 words: "Somebody should tell them." The way it worked was this. Anyone could write a card, anyone could leave a name and an address, anyone could put in what they had, and if they had nothing, they wrote it anyway, and the register was broken that day, and Wanda Hollis would look them in the eye while she said it, which was the part that mattered. In the first year, that table sent out 681 deliveries. They went to a woman in CO whose son had not called in 3 years. They went to a high school kid who had come in second at state and thought nobody had noticed. They went to a man on Bellflower Road who had put his dog down on a Tuesday, and to a nurse in Corvallis, from a family who could not think of one word to say to her, and to a widow in Sweet Home on the anniversary of a day nobody else in the world remembered. Ethan kept the book by hand in ink at the counter the way it had been kept since 1986. But he had changed one thing. He had added a column on the far right, and at the top of it in block letters it said "Why?" Because his grandmother had recorded 412 debts nobody was ever meant to pay, and it had taken a burned notebook and a dead woman's checkbook register and a 91-year-old bookkeeper in a nursing home to explain what those entries actually were. And Ethan Parker had decided that nobody was going to have to run that hard for the truth twice. Emily Carter's gallery show opened in Portland in February and sold out in 9 days. She did not move to Portland. She rebuilt the garden at the farmhouse that her mother had put in the summer before the accident, and she made every mortgage payment herself. And in the spring, she started teaching a Saturday class in the back of the flower shop for $9 a head. And the second week, a girl of about 16 came in alone and sat in the back and did not talk to anybody, and Emily did not push her, and the girl came back every Saturday for a year. Ethan and Emily took a long time. They were not a story that moved fast, either of them, and both of them had spent too many years alone to trust the first easy thing. There were months where they were just 2 people who ate dinner on Sundays. There was a bad stretch in the fall where she told him she could not tell whether she loved him or whether she loved being chosen, and he said, "Take as long as you need," and meant it, and went home and sat in his truck for an hour. But in March, he moved a chair into his apartment, a real one, and in April he stopped eating over the sink. And on a Friday in July at 6 in the morning, Ethan Parker did what he did every Friday. He made up 12 white roses. He drove them out to the cemetery on Farrell Road, past the Kiowa, past the church with the roof that had finally been fixed, and he put 6 of them on Margaret Parker's grave and 6 on the grave of a man named Thomas, who had died at 38 on a Thursday in February, with a second and a half to decide. He did not say much. He never did. But once a month or so, Dale Parker's truck was already there when he pulled in, and the 2 of them would stand in that grass without talking. And that was for those 2 men an entire conversation. And there was a 4th stop made once a year on a road outside Hawthorne at a grave with the name Rosalind Carter on it, and it was Emily who put the flowers down, and Ethan who stood behind her, and neither of them had ever once discussed whether it was strange. The last card Margaret Parker ever wrote is in a frame behind the counter at Parker's garden house. It is 4 inches by 2.5, and it says 2 words in handwriting that shakes at the end, from Ethan. She wrote it on a Thursday night with a bad heart and no time left for a woman she had watched from a distance for 25 years, and she signed it with her dead son's name because it was the only way she had ever found to say the thing out loud. She never got to explain it. She never got the chance to sit 2 lonely people down at her kitchen table and tell them the truth. She died on a concrete floor in a shop that made no money with an unsigned document in a lawyer's drawer and 11 letters she never mailed sitting in a flower catalog on the 3rd shelf. But 412 people in one small town knew exactly what she was, and one of them told another one, and it held. Margaret Parker never just ran a flower shop. For 40 years, she wrote down every kindness she gave away, so that someday when she was gone and could not defend herself, the truth would still be sitting there in her own hand waiting for somebody to open the book. Somebody did.